Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always my co-host Nick Volato. It's been a while since we recorded, Nick. I'm excited to get back in talking Giants football. I know we are in the dead zone of the Giants offseason and the NFL offseason, but before we reach the dead zone, as I like to call it, we have some OTAs to talk about. We finally got a little bit of media coverage at the OTAs, okay? We've had some OTAs before this. I think this is OTA day number 5. No media coverage, very little. I mean, you get like the Giants.com reports, but those are, grain of salt type of things. And now we finally have some really big topics to discuss that are unfolding from OTAs. I want to talk with you today about the offensive line, the first team that we've seen now, both in the earlier OTA pictures and now confirmed by, the beat writers who are there. I want to talk to you about Brian Daboll calling plays again, working with the quarterback, Steve Smith Sr., working with some of the Giants receivers. Early reports on Malik Nabers, very promising. Some stuff with Drew Lock, and of course, some of the different players that have been cycled in and out for the Giants. But I want to start with Brian Daboll calling plays, because this is now something we've seen through the beginning of OTAs. It was hinted at by Brian Daboll earlier. And now once again, during this media open practice, Brian Daboll was calling the plays, and he was working one-on-one with the quarterbacks. We saw him working with Jones after practice. So what do you make of the Giants making that decision to turn to Brian Daboll to not only call the plays, but kind of have more of this hands-on approach with the offense?
You practice like you play, right, Dan? It looks like possibly Brian Daboll could be calling plays. Look, there's so much that can still happen, but last year there was a lot of speculation that Brian Daboll was calling plays. I think Justin Pennick did a really good job laying this out on Twitter last year, on X, whatever the hell we're calling it. But we know Brian Daboll, a little bit of a control freak, right, Dan? A little bit of a control freak. I wouldn't be shocked if we see him calling plays. And look, I'm typically the type of individual who doesn't want their head coach calling plays. I want them to be the head coach, but certain circumstances, I would be open to it. It's just, what's Mike Kafka's role at that point? He's just going to be like Mike Shula was for Pat Shurmur, where look, that's a huge responsibility. I'm not devaluing that, but I don't know if Mike Kafka was the reason for the Giants' shitty offense last year. And I also don't know when or if Mike Kafka was calling plays for all 17 of the games last year. So there is still some conjecture there. But yeah, I look at the Brian Daboll calling plays. It doesn't surprise me, and I think this is certainly something that could happen when the season rolls around. It's just, what does that say about Mike Kafka, and why would Mike Kafka want to be on staff when he probably could leave and easily get another offensive coordinator job? The guy's been in consideration to be a head coach for 2 straight seasons.
It's really interesting from that standpoint, as far as where does it leave Kafka, who I believe was has a new role with the Giants this year that they gave him. A little bit of a promotion type thing to assistant head coach.
Yeah, what is that? It's all like
it's all conjecture, like you said. And I look at it like this, Nick. I think we both have a strong feeling that behind the scenes, the Giants have told Joe Schoen, look, your leash is longer than the media is giving you credit for, than some of the fans are giving credit for. But I'm not sold that same leash is extended to Brian Daboll. So I look at it like this is Brian Daboll looking at this like, I know I have to start winning football games, or that's just how the reality NFL goes. Yes, GMs get longer. Jerry Reese got a while. Dave Gettleman got 2 years too long. But it's not the same for head coaches. Within Dave Gettleman's 4-year disaster, he had 2 coaches. Within Jerry Reese's tenure, he had a lot of coaches. With the exception, actually not that many, because Tom Coughlin was so good. So he didn't actually have a lot of coaches. Yeah. But, it didn't matter because he hit on Tom Coughlin. But point being, I look at this like Brian Daboll saying, it's on me now. The pressure is on. I need to start winning football games. I'm going to take matters into my own hands by calling the plays this year and having full control over this offense from that standpoint. Now, you still never have full control because you still rely on your quarterback and your O-line, receivers, but it gives you more control.
And if you look at this Giants staff, they have surrounded the entire coaching staff with so many people who are up in the press box making calls and kind of helping Brian Daboll manage the clock, manage certain situations. They're very much bought into the analytics, which I'm a big fan of. So it wouldn't really be shocking if Daboll does transition to be a play caller, which he had success with Josh Allen in Buffalo, when you have so many other coaches who can kind of pick up the slack of head coaching duties while also assisting Brian Daboll in those head coaching duties. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that, but it is kind of one of those situations where it's going to breed more contempt from a coordinator on the roster, which we saw last year with Wink Martindale. Now, I think Wink Martindale's personality is completely different than Mike Kafka's, who is much more level-headed, but you still can be a level-headed guy who holds a lot of contempt for a ceremonial promotion, but actually a demotion if you're not calling the plays like you did in the previous 2 seasons.
Yeah, it's a great point too. And I think, the one thing that will heal that is winning, because these questions don't come up as much and the issues don't come up as much if you're winning football games. And that remains to be seen. I want to talk about probably the most important takeaway I've had from these OTAs, and it's the doings on the offensive line. So we'll start with two things. One, we start with the fact that earlier in OTAs, when they didn't have media coverage, we saw some photos that showed John Runyon not at left guard, the place he said he loves to play the most. John Runyon at right guard, maybe because Evan Neal might be the right tackle. Jermaine Illuminor at left guard. Now we have Carmen Bricillo speak for the first time to the Giants media and reveal a lot of interesting things. First, on Evan Neal, he said, I don't judge a player when they're young, and my rules are I don't judge a player when they're young, and I don't judge a player when they're injured, as it applies to Evan Neal. He said right now, Evan Neal will practice at right tackle, and Jermaine Illuminor will start at guard, but that's not a guarantee that will remain that way. Both are open to practicing at tackle and guard. He also said Josh Azuto has been working at both tackle and guard. He said another thing that I thought was interesting, Nick, because this applies specifically to the Giants. There will be no rotation, or at least he doesn't want there to be a rotation on the offensive line. He believes that, yes, he's used a rotation before. He knows the Giants have, but in his mind, a rotation can hurt a player's confidence. Obviously, the Giants have used rotations under the last two head coaches. What are your thoughts on that to start? Then I'll get into some of what we saw in 11-on-11 drills as far as what the first team offensive line was.
Okay, I don't want a rotation either. I think one of the reasons why the Giants had a rotation over the last few seasons is because they didn't have stability on the offensive line. And the major contributors to the rotation, the players who were rotated, were Josh Azuto and Ben Bredesen. I think it's because both of those players neither really seized the job, and both of them showed enough promise to where you wanted to play them. I think the Giants would have loved for Josh Azuto to seize that role, but he really didn't. I would say Ben Bredesen was more than likely a better player than Josh Azuto. Josh Azuto ended up dealing with injuries, and they liked him at tackle and all of this. But yeah, if I could get a stable five, so they can build that continuity with this offensive line coach, Carmen Bricillo, within the offensive structure of Mike Kafka or Brian Dable or whoever the hell is calling the plays. That's what I would prefer. And then if any of those guys go down, you have stable offensive linemen who know what to do with the respective position that they're attempting to fill, instead of a guard who needs to kick out to left tackle because Andrew Thomas hurt his hamstring or something crazy like that.
Yeah, I think you nailed that, Nick, and I think we're on the exact same page there. Now, as far as this is under an ideal scenario. Obviously, injuries can play a big factor in this, as we saw last year. The ideal scenario doesn't always become the scenario that plays out. But I like the idea of kind of trying to find that group that, and this is something we'll get into a little later. But John Michael Schmitz also talked about this as well. He said pretty clearly, I want to know who my guards are on each side, and that. Clearly, he didn't say it out loud, Nick, but it's hinting at. I didn't love last year when I had a million guys cycling in and out of guard, and I didn't really know, and it wasn't the same in camp as it was in the season, and the practice in the season wasn't the same in the games. It's a lot for a rookie center to deal with, and now he's entering year 2. He's taking more of a leadership role, and I like that he was clear with that. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder how much the confidence affected him too, because kind of Bricillo's comments, it was more directed at Neal. And while John Michael Schmitz, he dealt with like little injuries as every offensive lineman does, he presumably wasn't playing as injured as Evan Neal. But I still think the judging the young players is a quote by Bricillo that could apply to John Michael Schmitz. Look, John Michael Schmitz could be a confidence thing, and we haven't really attributed this to him, but yeah, him playing with Marcus McKeithen and then, Justin Pugh and all these different offensive linemen, that could affect him, but I don't think it was necessarily a mental thing that he was trying to overcome with the different offensive linemen. Sure, that could play into it, but he was just getting beat. Like, he was just losing.
Right.
And that's a physical thing. Now, mentally, that could really affect him, and then maybe he's overthinking and he's not in the right position, of course. But I need to see him really stabilize from a physical standpoint and not get beat on these pass protection reps. I do think, though, having stable offensive linemen next to him, that can only probably smooth out and assuage that situation, if that makes sense.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's very fair. And I'm curious to see that development because, yes, I have hope for Evan Neal, but it almost feels a little bit like, I don't want to call it homerism, Nick. That's not the right word. It's almost feels a little bit more like me putting, leaning too heavily on my pre-draft evaluation. And I am strong. Like, look, we put enough work in, me and you, that I'm not going to just throw that work out and be like, oh, well, this is just not what it is. But that does happen sometimes. Like, I didn't get a chance to evaluate him, but I'm sure if we watched the tape of Clyde Edwards-Helaire at LSU, we'd have been like, this dude's going to be a pretty good player in the NFL. He can pass protect a little bit. He can run routes really well. He's going to be able to play inside zone well, run inside zone well, all these different things. And the speed of the NFL game, he never caught up to it.
Look, with Evan Neal, we were high on him. A lot of people were, but we knew his drawbacks. We knew what could hurt him at the next level. And all of that just manifested.
I didn't know
he didn't develop past that.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know you. I didn't want to cut off your full point. I didn't know for sure. I just want to make it clear, though. I didn't know for sure that those drawbacks that we knew what they were going to be so debilitating, I guess.
Well, no, neither did I. And if we did, we would have had him lower.
Right.
But the fact is, look, he's entering the NFL and you're like, oh, he has these drawbacks. But realistically speaking, yeah, progression, trajectory, it's not always linear. It's not always going up. But that doesn't mean it doesn't go up at all. Like he didn't progress at all from the day the New York Giants selected him. And maybe, hopefully, according to these Bricillo comments, some of these injuries really did play a bigger role in that than we originally anticipated. But man, dude, we knew he had balance issues at Alabama. I did not think it would manifest in the way that it has. And I did not realize that he would struggle so much with speed. I do think it is confidence, though. And we've heard Andrew Thomas talk about the role in confidence, I believe, in the past, and how once it all started clicking together, he ended up, I think it was towards the end of his rookie season, kind of gelling a little bit and showed us a little bit of signs. Oh, okay. Like, it wasn't great against the Cardinals and the Ravens in 2020, but it wasn't terrible, right? But then in week 1 the next season, it's pretty damn good. Then you just started seeing Andrew Thomas smooth out after that. And that's what I'm hoping can happen with Evan. That's what we're all hoping can happen with Evan Neal. I'm just not necessarily optimistic. And this is the year, man. If it doesn't happen this year, you have to talk about kicking him inside or doing something else. Like, this is his last opportunity at right tackle.
You're right about that. This is it. I mean, like, at that point, it's you try him at guard, and if not, he's just a bust. But it is interesting to me, just from this takeaway, at least, Nick, that it's not going to be what some people have suggested, right? Let's make it an open competition, him and Illuminor for right tackle. No. It seems like he's going to be trained at right tackle. Illuminor is going to be trained at guard to start this thing. And, if worst comes to worst, they'll move off that plan. But it's not an open competition, or it doesn't sound like one to me at all whatsoever. And so, and I hate to say it because I know there's some downside to it, and I know some of our listeners have suggested there are better options, but this is the option I like the best, to be completely honest with you, Nick.
You have to try it.
I mean, I'm fine with Luminor eventually playing right tackle, and it will set the team back a little bit that he never got to practice at it with the first team, and that is what it is. But I need the highest ceiling outcome. The highest ceiling outcome is Evan Neal at right tackle.
100%. And also, dude, you invested so much in it. You invested a top 10 pick in Evan Neal. Now you're going to change the guy who's directly coaching him. You're going to surround him with better talent at guard, a more stable situation. And then you're just going to say, you know what? Now you can't play right tackle. That would be a huge indictment on Evan Neal if the Giants actually abandoned this project of him at right tackle and did go with Illuminor, this guy who's only going to be here for possibly 2 years, who's already older. That would say a lot about the state of Evan Neal. And I'm just hoping that's not the case.
Yep. And to go over a little bit of the brass facts of this, the Giants offensive line today during the practice open to the media in 11-on-11 drills was Andrew Thomas left tackle, Jermaine Illuminor left guard. So that's carrying over. He's going to be trained at left guard. John Michael Smith center, John Runyon right guard. So I think that for now is pretty locked in. And I think, again, a lot of that has to do with the Giants want their best pass protector on the interior, which at this point I think is undoubtedly John Runyon. Look, Illuminor has played some guard, but he's a better tackle than guard, I think, at least so far in his career. And now he's going to left guard. John Michael Smith, again, center, had a great grade coming out, but, wasn't great in pass pro last year. Let's just be clear about that. And we hope it's going to be better this year. Runyon has proven some in pass pro, proven a lot in pass pro. So he's played both sides, and you want to put your best protector next to Neal. But it was also Azudu at right tackle in 11-11s, though in the walkthroughs, Neal came in at right tackle. So maybe that has to do with the fact that Neal may not be 100% healthy just yet for the Giants, which is, again, lingering from last year where he had the injury. But for now, it's Josh Azudu playing some right tackle for the Giants. Azudu really getting that run at tackle and guard, and in addition to guard. I mean, the Azudu thing is really interesting. They really have not given up on this idea of him potentially being a swing tackle.
I don't love the idea. I didn't see a lot at UNC to suggest that he's going to be like, I always felt like his set and then his explosiveness out of his set. I think he's explosive, but I didn't ever see somebody who was really stable and square to target and disciplined with his hips. He kind of had, I would say, just funky footwork too when he was at UNC, but it was impressive because he would play guard and then play tackle the next snap. So kudos. The Giants probably love his foot speed and his ability to explode out of his stance and what he can do when he is operating in space. And then maybe they don't think he's, strong enough at the point of attack to play guard. Does that make sense? I'm not sure. Maybe this is a high upside swing for them as well. But I look at when the season rolls around, look, I would love for Josh Azudu to be a swing tackle here if he's not going to start. But it does seem like Jermaine Illuminor, if Evan Neal is hurt or does not work out, Jermaine Illuminor would be that right tackle. And then what? Would you kick Josh Azudu back in at left guard? Like, how is that going to work? I'm just wondering, like, what this looks like when the season rolls around. Like, is Aaron Stinnie factor into this at all? Because he was a competent guard in Tampa.
I think the interesting factor, and that's a good question, Nick. I think an interesting factor in that is, look, you're kind of like juggling two different things here. You're juggling the idea of like what Carmen Bricillo said earlier, which is like, and what John Michael Schmidt said, like, we need continuity. We need the same guys at those positions. So with that in mind, you don't really want to cross-train Jermaine Illuminor. You just want to let him rip at left guard and keep that thing going day after day. With a guy like Azudu, you're not as worried about that because he's going to be a backup. So you can cross-train him a little bit at right tackle, right guard. Does that hurt you in the long run? Maybe. If Neal doesn't work out, it certainly does, because Illuminor didn't get those reps at right tackle. He didn't build that chemistry next to John Runyon. But ideally, you hope that Neal can stick there and Illuminor can stick there. With Ezeudu, I think you're less worried about that. But I agree with you, man. Like, I'm not necessarily sure here that Ezeudu can play that position, but I do know how they feel, which is probably, look, we have a lot more depth at guard right now than we have at tackle. And so we need to put some bodies out there getting reps at tackle in case what happens last year happens again, where we need to put different guys at tackle than we expected. And maybe in that scenario, you're right. They do just kick Illuminor over, but I still think they want to get that best case going, which means Illuminor is getting all the reps possible at left guard.
It's just interesting because a lot of us, me included, believe that Illuminor was somebody the Giants would bring in and he could start at guard, and that would be excellent, right? But he's also a direct contingency plan for if Evan Neal fails. Because if you have Josh Ezeudu as your contingency plan to Evan Neal, I just think that's a mistake. And I'm not claiming to know anything more than Carmen. Like, I'm an idiot compared to these people, right? Like, I'll flat out say that. But it does seem like some of your biggest liabilities on the 2023 offensive line were Evan Neal and Josh Ezeudu, before Josh Ezeudu ended up suffering a season-ending injury playing left tackle. So, I mean, I'm going to trust the process and see, but it just seems like not using Illuminor as a contingency plan for Evan Neal, if that's what they do. I'm not saying that's what they do, but suggesting by the Bricillo in the comments from John Michael Schmitz, that could be, hey, he's just going to play left guard. That's it. Like, it just seems like you're not really gaining much if Evan Neal doesn't work out. Jermaine Illuminor has like 11 snaps at left guard in his career.
Right.
He played over 700 last year, over 800 in the previous season at right tackle. And he has experience at right tackle with Carmen Bricillo. So it just seems like naturally that would be the right tackle. And this is OTAs. So what does it mean? But you do practice like you play, baby.
The other side of that, maybe just to close out on this, would be maybe Carmen Bricillo feels so confident that he could play right tackle just like this if they needed Illuminor to, based on what you just said, all the experience he has already playing within his system, that he can just be like, we can train him there at guard and not worry about throwing him back in there.
Could be that. And now you would say, oh, well, don't you want the continuity with John Runyon? And it's like, yeah, sure. But at the same time, these are two professionals. The Giants haven't had a lot of like true professionals, you know what I'm saying, that weren't like young rookies who were learning to be professionals playing at tackle and guard over the last several seasons.
And they're really confident in these two, man. You heard, Brandon Brown spoke today, the Giants assistant GM, and he's like, look, people asked me like, what happened in the draft? You didn't go in the O-line. He's like, we had a plan. We had for months set aside that we have these specific guys in mind to bring in via free agency to help our O-line. And we want to let those guys play. And we believe in those guys. We're really confident in Runyon and Illuminor. And honestly, both guys had pretty solid film last year. And we're not saying they brought in superstar guys at right guard and right tackle. But like you said, they brought in professionals. They're confident they can get professional level play. And that's all they need. They have one superstar already with Andrew Thomas, right? They just need professional level play out of the other four. No weaklings out of the other four. And that's going to lead to the best offensive line the Giants have had since basically 2009 at that point. Like, if they could just get four professional level play, four guys doing professional level play, and one superstar play, it's all they really need. It's somehow so much easier said than done. I don't understand how it's so hard to build an offensive line in the NFL when you put all these assets into it. But somehow, some way, the Giants have really failed to do that. But the hope is that they really nailed it this time. They zoned in on two free agents that they were looking at for months, knowing how bad the O-line's been, and the other guys will progress. JMS, Neal, and you already got it with Andrew Thomas. It doesn't seem that hard to me on paper, Nick. Like, I'm talking about a first-round pick at tackle playing professional, decent level football in Evan Neal, a top 7 pick, a top 50 pick at center, which is basically like a first-round pick at center. There's a second center off the board playing professional level football. You're locked in with Thomas, and then the two guys they signed. It should work.
It should work, but we've said that in the past, and it hasn't. But you're right, man. Logically, it should work. Because even if you take John Michael Schmitz and Evan Neal out of it, the upgrade that you receive with Illuminor and John Runyon playing your guard positions over Marcus McKeithen and Josh Ezeudu last season, who were like starting at guard. Like, it was a bad situation. Look, it was a calculated risk. You selected these players. You were confident in these players. Both of those players were in bad positions. Look, Josh Ezeudu had an up and down rookie season, dealt with some injuries. A lot of people, I remember they were talking about his neck. They were like, oh, is he even going to be able to play anymore? Marcus McKeithen was recovering from a torn ACL. Both of these guys have to go out there and play against the 49ers. Are you kidding me? Like, it's just a really tough spot, and it just blew up in the Giants' face. And now they actually have plans in place to to put the Giants offense into a better position and to put their quarterback into a better position.
Sure. A few other things on the offense side of the ball I want to touch on. Darius Slayton is back with the Giants at OTAs today. He discussed how there was no contract change, but they did add incentives, the Giants, to his contract, which is going to be interesting. It's going to be difficult for him to hit those given how deep the wide receiver room is, but I don't care. He's back. This is a good thing. You need depth at the wide receiver position. He has a skill set that works. He's really somehow found a way to be productive despite the awful offensive line and quarterback play that he's had throughout his career here. Last year found his most production working with Tyrod Taylor, back-to-back 60-plus yard touchdowns to end the season for Darius Slayton, which is really impressive considering the Giants have had like none of those walk-in 60-plus yard touchdowns over the last 5 years of football. Very few to remember. I think he had one against Washington at one point. And then maybe there was one against the Steelers at one point, the John Ross one, and that's about it as far, and the Barkley one, that's about it as far as walk-in 60-plus yard touchdowns. And he provided two the last 2 weeks of the season. So I think he's going to be one of the better players on the offense, regardless of what people think there. So happy to have him back. Daniel Jones and some quarterback updates here. Actually, let's do Nabers stuff first. Nabers looking really good so far in OTAs. No surprise to me. I mean, the tape is just phenomenal.
Great player, man.
He's a great
Giants
player.
got a good one, dude.
More importantly, maybe he might also have the it factor because Drew Lock cited his work ethic as one reason why he just knows this guy's going to be really good. Brandon Brown said one thing that what he really appreciates is that Nabers having no trouble moving around within the offense. He's picking it up with no issues. And he said, Brandon Brown said, quote, that's a large task for him to have to be avoiding the mental errors that he's avoided so far. And that's something that Drew Lock said as well. He said, look, how the work that Nabers is putting in to learn the playbook, it's really showing, and it really matters to me as a quarterback because you can see he's doing everything to avoid the mental errors. And that's not uncommon. Remember, we've heard in this system, or that is uncommon, I should say. We've heard in this system, it's hard to pick up for the receivers. There's a lot of option routes. There's things that these receivers have to pick up that have, quite frankly, other receivers the Giants have drafted have struggled. Kadarius Toney really struggled to pick up this playbook. And to have that out of the way is something that they're not going to have to worry about is really, really important to me. And I'm glad that we're already hearing signs that because you could easily be hearing the opposite. Like, he's working with the second team, third team because he's not picking this thing up fast enough.
Exactly. I mean, we saw that recent memory with Kadarius Toney. He was getting played over by David Sills, who was playing over.
All right.
Dude, David Sills, I mean, we've talked about it before, but that dude was playing over a huge contract of Kenny Golladay and a first-round pick of Kadarius Toney. Like, the Giants did everything in their power to surround that offense with explosive playmakers, and both of them couldn't find the football field for different reasons. It was just terrible, man.
Yep. Some stats on the quarterbacks. Not that I care about this, but Daniel Jones was 5 of 6 and 7 on 7 drills today. He connected twice with Wan'Dale Robinson, according to the beat writers. Again, he did not play in 11 on 11 first-team drills. The 11 on 11s, Drew Lock took all the first-team reps, 17 of 23, but 3 of those completions were obvious sacks, according to the beats. And this goes to show you, look, we did this last year. We're not doing it again. We're going to talk about the stats a little bit and what it means, but we're not going to overinflate what this means. I mean, look, like you said, 3 of these completions were obvious sacks. It just doesn't mean much. I think you got to really be there. I've said this in the past to really see it and understand it. I've been at Giants training camp practices. What you see in training camp is just not what you get in a regular season. There's no scheming by the defense, really. The live bullets are just not flying. Your offensive line is not really doing much, and your defensive line is not doing much. It's a totally different speed and feel. So, and you can't get sacked. So, we'll talk about it, but I'm not as focused on that. What I am focused on, Nick, is Daniel Jones competing already in 7-on-7 drills. And now we're hearing a different tune from Brian Daboll, who in the past said, look, Jones is going to not really do anything this spring from an 11-on-11 standpoint. He'll we expect him to be ready for the start of training camp. And within that, he said Drew Lock's going to get a really good opportunity. He's going to take all the first team reps in the spring. That's not necessarily the case anymore. Jones has been progressing pretty fast. And today, Brian Daboll acknowledged that they've been talking behind the scenes about Jones joining the 11-on-11 drills in the spring. And according to Pat Leonard, his speculation is Jones could be ready for the minicamp, the mandatory minicamp. It wouldn't shock him. That's a big factor. If Jones is this, recovered from it, and he's starting to take those minicamp 11-on-11s, It's going to mean a lot toward what we see in the spring. In training camp. And he did a lot of work on the side today, according to the beats, planting on his right leg. That's the ACL leg, rolling out hard to his left, and then throwing to Isaiah McKinney. So really interesting stuff to see Jones progressing this far, Nick.
Good for him, man. Good for him. Look,
Yeah.
that's a tough thing to overcome, right? Torn ACL, and he's a mobile quarterback, and it looks like he's moving around well, and we'll see how he progresses in the coming weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And on that note, this was from Connor Hughes, who covers, and he said, I get that it's OTAs, but based on what I've seen, I'd be floored if Daniel Jones isn't the runaway quarterback one, with Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito providing no real push to be QB1. And this doesn't surprise me in any way, Nick, for a multitude of reasons. One, look, Daniel Jones knows this offense really well. He's been in this offense longer than DeVito. He's been in this offense longer than Locke. DeVito had last season. Locke has had no season. So he's going to be quicker with his reads. He's going to get the ball out faster. It's going to look smoother and better. Two, Daniel Jones is the highest upside quarterback on this roster by far. He's got better arm talent than Drew Lock, in my mind at least. It can be debated, but I think he's got overall better arm talent across the board. If you just look at the overall, he's bigger than Lock. He has been more on time than Locke as a quarterback in the NFL level, at least. He's faster and more athletic than Locke. All of those factors are in play that give him the higher ceiling. Doesn't mean he'll reach his ceiling. He hasn't obviously reached his ceiling with the Giants at any point. You could say 2022, but Nick and I would debate that because the Giants were dead last in explosive pass plays. He didn't even throw for 15 passing touchdowns. They were averaging like 100, 200 yards per game passing. That wasn't the ceiling, I hope. I hope he's got a better ceiling. I think everyone should hope there's a better ceiling in play. And I think there is a better ceiling than Drew Lock offers and a better ceiling than Tommy DeVito offers. So if he's healthy and can get through the mini camp and then obviously training camp, I think he will run away with the quarterback one job.
Look, we don't know what Darren Waller's doing, and we haven't even talked about Darren Waller. Could you imagine Darren Waller with Malik Nabers in this offense? If Darren Waller was fully dialed in, if he was like, look, man, look, I am here. I'm here for this team. Let's go. Let's get it. That would be pretty fun to watch, man.
Yeah.
Now, Devin Singletary is not Saquon Barkley, but Devin Singletary is better than a lot of people want to give him credit for. So that would be something to monitor. But even without Darren Waller and the trio of tight ends that the Giants could roll out there with Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger, Jack Stoll, Chris Mannertz, whichever one of those two they want to roll in a 13 personnel package, Malik Nabers, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, they can help Daniel Jones. If this offensive line stabilizes, they can help Daniel Jones reach that ceiling that we might not have seen yet.
Yeah, and that would be something that we would obviously welcome as Giants fans, because it would mean more fun to watch this team, actual passing offense for the first time in a long time. And I'm hoping to see that. I'm hoping to see some explosive pass plays. I'm hoping to see some production in the pass game that we haven't quite had to this point yet, at least. So we'll see what happens there, but it doesn't surprise me. I think Jones clearly gives them the most upside, and they got to go with the upside, right? Like, there's all this talk about the injury guarantee, but their Giants are in a position where they've built enough of the roster out and they've put enough talent and they've invested that big play to get a Burns type in here and trade a draft pick for Burns and allocate all that cap space on a second contract to Burns, where you have to try to play to win and you have to try to give yourself the best chance to win. And Jones gives them the best chance to win. If they're losing early, 2-4, 1-3, 1-4, at that point, I'm okay with them pulling the plug on it, because, you don't want to risk it. But you probably even have to go a little bit deeper than that, give them even more of a chance. But they got to win early, though, because the games to win on this schedule are certainly early with Commanders, Vikings, and, things of that nature. So you got to win some games early for sure. But, that's the first thing you got to do. You got to give them a chance to put their best team out there, and Jones gives them that opportunity. A few other things to clean up on that we have here. I think those are the main points, but a few other things that we have. Gary Brightwell was released, the Giants' former draft pick, and
waived.
Yeah, waived. I think injured waived. Is that what he was?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Giants have added players this offseason at running back, Tyrone Tracy and Miller. So there's obviously more competition there, and maybe that's an injury-based thing too. But, with guys like Singletary, Gray, Tracy, Miller, Corbin even still in the mix, I just feel like that they probably looked at it like, we've added what we needed to make up for special teams. He's still not fully healthy, and we have to go a different direction. Maybe he can join back up in training camp, though.
I'm sure he probably will if he's all ready and good to go. But this does make it interesting, man, because if something happens to any of these top three guys, Singletary, Gray, or Tyrone Tracy, you're looking at Jashaun Corbin, who has been a name that's floated around, kid from Florida State a couple years ago, and then Dante Miller, who I haven't watched a lot of tape on Miller. Very fast, though. An explosive type of guy. Giant. Turbo Miller, right? And this is a player who Giants have lacked explosive plays just in general. Maybe having a very explosive player, a more explosive player than any of these other running backs on the roster could help them. I don't know if he'll factor in the special teams with the special teams and the kickoff changing, but if something does happen, man, that could be a name to monitor that we'll be talking about through training camp who could possibly make the roster and be a contributor on offense.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to track. And one final thing that before we wrap up here that I forgot to mention, Steve Smith Sr., one of the best receivers that I got to watch as a kid growing up, working with some Giants today. He's not in a coaching role yet or anything like that, but it's going to spend a few days during OTAs with the Giants to help work with receivers. I saw him working on some releases with Jalen Hyatt in a video that looked really cool, and it was really exciting to see that. And I saw him working with Nabers right there, watching Nabers in the video I saw was watching what he was teaching technique-wise to Jalen Hyatt. So can't hurt to have Steve Smith there at the Giants game. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was insanely productive as a wide receiver, despite being like 5'9" and 180 pounds or something like that. Like, he broke the mold. He was like, he's not just some physical freak that was successful. No. He won with technique. Obviously, if you're like 5 foot, whatever he was, and his weight, you're winning. You're winning toughness too, but his release package was wild to watch him create separation. So I'm excited to see him teach some of those releases to Jalen Hyatt and even to Malik Nabers, who we discussed when we broke down Nabers. Like, he could still, if there's room to grow for him, there still is that release package off the line of scrimmage that can be worked on and improved, and it could make him ultimately like a all-time receiver if he hones that in and gets really good at that. That's all the time for we have today on the Big Blue Banter podcast. Getting you updated on some OTAs where we have some media coverage. Keep it locked and loaded. We're going to keep it rolling here with OTAs and get into some other interesting stuff as we move forward through these months of June and then July before training camp. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.